Intermittent fasting is one of those health topics where people go to extremes. Some people talk about it like it cures everything: weight loss, inflammation, insulin resistance, longevity, brain health, you name it. Other people say fasting is terrible and you should never do it. So, which is it? Is intermittent fasting actually helpful, or is it overhyped? The honest answer is it depends. Fasting can be a helpful tool for some people, but it's not magic, and it's not required for weight loss. It's not automatically better than eating in a more traditional pattern, and for some people, it can backfire. So today, we're going to break down what intermittent fasting actually is, why it may help, how to do it properly, who may benefit, and who should be cautious. Hi, I'm Dr. K. I'm a pharmacist and clinician who works directly with patients on weight loss, hormone health, and metabolic health. My goal is to explain these topics in a practical, evidence-informed way so you can better understand your own body and make more confident health decisions. I've cited all my sources below, and as always, this video is for education only. It is not personal medical advice. So let's break it down. Intermittent fasting is not one specific diet. It's more of an eating schedule. Instead of focusing on what you eat, it focuses on when you eat. The most common version is time-restricted eating, where someone eats during a set window each day. For example, eating between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., then fasting the rest of the day. That's often called a 16-8 schedule, 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of eating. Here is the first important point. Fasting doesn't automatically mean you're eating healthier. I remember seeing ads that made intermittent fasting sound like you could eat whatever you wanted during the eating window, but that's not really how this works. You can fast for 16 hours and still eat ultra-processed foods, low protein, low fiber, and too many calories during your eating window. So the fasting window matters, but food quality also matters. One mistake I see with intermittent fasting is that people may not be eating during the fasting window, but they're still drinking things that keep the body and brain in food mode. This is where people get confused, because they think, well, it has 0 calories, so it must be fine. But people get into trouble with sweet drinks even if they are 0 calorie. Diet sodas, zero sugar energy drinks, and flavored waters with artificial sweeteners. Fasting is not only about calories. We also have to think about whether something stimulates sweet taste, cravings, appetite, insulin signaling, or food-related responses in the body. So during the fasting window, my practical recommendation is to keep it pretty boring. Water, plain sparkling water, plain black coffee with no add-ins, unsweetened tea, and unsweetened electrolytes if needed. That is the cleanest version. During the eating window, that's when you can have coffee with cream, protein shakes, flavored drinks, or diet soda if you choose to include those. Because the goal is not just to not chew food, the goal is to quiet the constant food signals. So why does fasting help some people? Well, the biggest reason is simple. It can make it easier to eat less. If someone normally eats breakfast, snacks throughout the day, eats dinner, and then snacks again at night, shortening that eating window may naturally reduce calorie intake. Not because fasting has magical fat-burning powers, but because there are fewer hours available to eat. For some people, that structure is helpful. It can reduce grazing, late-night snacking, and extra calories that sneak in after dinner. But we need to be honest about what the research actually shows. When researchers compared fasting to regular calorie restriction, fasting is often not clearly superior. In a 12-month randomized trial published in the New England Journal of Medicine, adults with obesity were assigned to calorie restriction with time-restricted eating or calorie restriction by itself. At the end of the study, the time-restricted eating didn't produce greater weight loss, body fat reduction, or improvement in metabolic risk factors compared with just daily calorie restriction alone. So fasting may work, but mainly because it helps people reduce calories and stick to a structure. And that doesn't make it bad. It just means we shouldn't oversell it. If fasting helps you reduce late-night snacking and stay consistent, it can be useful. But if someone else gets the same result by eating 3 balanced meals with protein, fiber, and appropriate portions, that can also work. And weight loss is not automatically fat loss. Some studies show time-restricted eating can reduce body weight and fat mass, but some also show reductions in fat-free mass, which includes lean tissue like muscle. And that's why I always come back to protein and resistance exercises for muscle preservation. Now let's talk about insulin, because this is where fasting gets a lot of attention. When someone has insulin resistance, the body is not responding to insulin as well as it should. So the pancreas has to make more insulin to get the same job done. See the video on my channel about insulin resistance. Insulin is a storage hormone, so when it's chronically high, the body tends to stay more in what I often describe as fat storage mode. Some studies suggest that time-restricted eating, especially earlier eating windows like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., might improve insulin sensitivity, fasting insulin, blood pressure, and other cardiometabolic factors. But timing really matters here. If someone says, well, I'm intermittent fasting, but what they really mean is they skip breakfast, barely eat during the day, then eat a large meal and snacks late at night, that's not going to give them the same benefit. For some people, especially those with insulin resistance, eating earlier and avoiding late night snacking may be more helpful than simply pushing the first meal later and later. It's not about seeing how long you can go without food. It's about creating a rhythm that supports your metabolism, appetite, sleep, blood sugar, and consistency. Fasting can backfire in a few common ways. First, undereating earlier in the day can backfire by increasing hunger, cravings, and overeating later. It could also potentially worsen insulin resistance. Some people skip breakfast, push through hunger, run on caffeine, and by the end of the day, they're starving. At that point, cravings go up, food choices get worse, and portion control gets harder. That is not a metabolic hack. That's just delayed overeating. Second, fasting can make it harder to get enough protein. This really matters for anyone trying to lose weight, but especially for people using GLP-1 medications like semaglutide or tirzepatide. If appetite is already suppressed and someone is eating one small meal a day, the scale may go down, but some of that weight loss may be in muscle, and that's not the goal. Third, fasting doesn't cancel out a poor diet. If the eating window is filled with ultra-processed foods, sugary drinks, low protein, low fiber, and very little nutrient density, fasting is not going to magically fix that. And fourth, fasting can become too restrictive for some people. It can trigger binge restrict cycles or make people ignore normal hunger cues. That doesn't mean that fasting causes eating disorders in everyone, but it does mean we should not casually recommend it to everyone. So who might benefit from intermittent fasting? Someone who struggles with late night snacking may benefit from a clear cutoff time. Someone who naturally does not feel hungry first thing in the morning may be fine with a slightly delayed breakfast, as long as they still get enough protein and nutrition. Someone with insulin resistance may benefit from a more structured eating window, especially if it helps reduce evening eating. Someone who hates calorie tracking or does better with simple rules may like the structure. But fasting is not for everyone. People who are pregnant or breastfeeding generally should not fast for weight loss. Children and teenagers shouldn't do restrictive fasting unless directed by a qualified clinician. People with a history of eating disorders or binge restrict patterns should be very cautious. And people who take medications that cause low blood sugar like insulin or sulfonylureas need medical guidance before fasting. People with diabetes, chronic undereating, significant fatigue, high stress, or a history of feeling worse when they skip meals may also not do well with aggressive fasting. And for people on GLP-1 medications, fasting may not be a good fit at all. If appetite is already very suppressed and you're barely getting enough protein, fasting may make that worse. In that case, the answer is usually not a shorter eating window. The answer may be more structured nutrition, small protein-focused meals, hydration, fiber, and resistance exercises. If you want to do intermittent fasting, here's how I would approach it. Start with the least aggressive version. You shouldn't jump into a 20-hour fast right off the bat. A very reasonable version for many people is simply a 12-hour overnight fast. For example, finish eating around 7 p.m. and then eat breakfast around 7 a.m. That alone can reduce late night snacking and create a better rhythm. From there, some people may do well with a 14-hour fast. Maybe dinner ends at 7 and the first meal is around 9. That's not extreme, that's doable. During the eating window, meals should be built around protein, fiber, and nutrient-dense foods. A good starting structure is to have half your plate as fruits and vegetables, 1/4 of the plate from lean healthy proteins, and 1/4 from high fiber grains. Protein helps preserve muscle. Fiber slows carbohydrate absorption, which can help create a slower rise and a slower fall in blood sugar instead of a spike and a crash. Again, nothing fancy, just structure. So is intermittent fasting helpful or is it overhyped? It can be helpful for some people, but it definitely is overhyped when people talk about it like it's required, magical, or superior for everyone. For the right person, it can be a simple structure that reduces snacking, improves consistency, and may support metabolic health. For the wrong person, it can increase cravings, worsen undereating, reduce protein intake, trigger disordered eating patterns, or make nutrition harder than it needs to be. So instead of asking, is fasting good or bad? A better question is, would this eating pattern help me eat enough of the right things, avoid the things that are holding me back, and stay consistent long term? Because that's what actually matters. Thanks for breaking it down with me today. I'm Dr. K. If you found this helpful, give the video a like, share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe for more health topics broken down in a practical way. And let me know in the comments what topic you'd like me to break down in a future video.